Session 54. Good evening. John said, "Hi, Seth. How are you?" They said, "Good evening, Philip. After our brief sessions of last week, I am pleased to see Rupert in good condition once again. I would suggest that you watch for the May 23rd date which I have given you in regard to Miss Callahan, and that you use some caution in dealing with whatever situation may arise." It was a good move, as far as getting rid of the blue couch was concerned. Miss Callahan would have come in here, seeking it, and a critical situation would have resulted. She will not bother your neighbor. You have not asked me, and so I did not tell you. Nevertheless, there is no distortion in the particular material which you have been reading. Your Rupert was, indeed, says. Your Rupert spoke with my voice, for it was his voice. There is no invasion involved in these sessions, as I have told you often. I have promised to give you more material dealing with the psychic construction of the entity, and its relationship to its fragments. I could not tell you in the beginning in so many words that Rupert is myself, because you would have leaped to the conclusion that I was Rupert's subconscious mind, and this is not so. When you understand the construction of entities, then you will understand how this can be so. Rupert is not myself now, in his present life. He is nevertheless an extension and materialization of the Seth that I was at one time. Nothing remains unchanging. Personalities and entities, least of all. You are still thinking in terms of concrete things. You cannot stop an entity or a personality in time, as you would like to do. I am Seth today. I keep my continuity, but nevertheless I change, and offshoots like currents explode into being. As an idea changes, so do entities change while still retaining individuality and durability. But you cannot set up imaginary barriers and stop or freeze my identity, nor for that matter your own. Rupert was myself, says, many centuries ago, but he grew, evolved, and expanded in terms of a particular personal set of value fulfillments. He is now an actual gestalt, a personality that was one of the probable personalities into which Seth could grow. I represent another. I am another. I have mentioned to you that endless personalities, in terms of value fulfillment, is it inherent in each of your physical atoms, molecules, and smaller particles. So, also, each entity contains within itself almost endless possibilities in terms of value fulfillment. As the physical atoms and molecules combine to form cells, and the cells to form physical organs, and as they do not lose their individuality in so doing, and as the atoms and molecules themselves actually gain and share in higher perceptions because of this gestalt, so do the basic components or fragments of an entity constantly form new and varied personalities, and these in turn form entities of their own. I realize that this is somewhat difficult, but when you reread the last two sessions, you will understand this material completely. Rupert is now the result of the Seth that I once was, for I have changed since then. Rupert represents and is a personality formed by that Seth which was myself. by focusing upon and using a peculiar set of attributes and abilities. To make it simpler, perhaps we split this being necessary always so that various possibilities can be brought into action. Rupert has changed since then, and so have I. And yet we are bound together, and no invasion occurs, because in one way of speaking, our psychic territory is the same. I will go into the construction of entities later. My own emotional feeling, you see, goes outward, which is away from Rupert often, since basically we are tempted to think of ourselves as one, though actually our roots are merely the same. I suggest your first break. There is indeed no contradiction, though it may appear so, in the fact that all entities existed before your planet was formed, and the fact that fragments form new entities. I have told you that your conception of cause and effect is faulty and antiquated, and I have said that the cause and effect theory is logical only as a result of your theory of time and continuity. If time as you think of it does not exist, and it does not, then the cause and effect theory does not follow. I have told you that all consciousness exists in the spacious present, which is spontaneous, while also durable. Then it is no contradiction to say that entities existed before the birth of your planet, though in your time it seems that new ones are being brought to consciousness. In their materialization upon your plane, and as seen from your own camouflage perspective, you seem to be aware of new entities, but this is because of your own limited viewpoint. In your time, skin entities have had time to produce more fragmentary personalities, but in truth, from your viewpoint, these personalities can be seen to have changed long ago. The old analogy, rather trite, I am afraid, is still a good one. Walking through a forest, you find many trees. Time can be conceived of, truly, as the entire forest. You, however, see a tree in front of you, and call it the future. You think that the tree was not there, because you had not come to it yet. The tree behind you, you call the past. You are walking, so to speak, along one narrow path. But there are many paths. The forest exists as a whole. You can walk forward, so to speak, and backward, though you are only now learning how. We will carry this analogy a giant step further. Now, we will call the whole forest, if you can conceive of it, the spacious present. The trees are compared to consciousness, all existing simultaneously, and yet this forest of spacious present does not take up space, as you think of space. There is no past, present, or future in your terms within it, but only a now. Because of the endless possibilities within this now, durability is maintained in terms of value fulfillment, the fulfillment of literally endless values. Therefore, the forest is constantly expanding. Remember your expanding universe theory, but not in terms of space or indeed in terms of time, but in terms of fulfillment of abilities and values that may be constructed upon various levels and in various guises, your present plane of existence being one. And in each of these planes of existence, there is a reflection of the basic laws of the spacious present itself, which I am in the process of giving you. Therefore, there is no need, really, to think of a given group of entities before the birth of your planet. I have said that all the entities who would ever dwell upon your planet, they exist, and actually have a hand in on the creation of your planet, that would ever dwell upon it. I also said that new entities were being formed, but in the framework of the spacious present, all this is spontaneous. The contradiction seems a contradiction only on your terms. On my terms, there is none. For practical purposes, you may say, in truth on your own terms, that entities simply have had time to develop further personalities. But I want it understood that this is true only within your own time framework. There is much yet to be covered dealing with a spontaneity that is nevertheless durable. I have also said that your own present existence occurs simultaneously. You only perceive it in slow motion. I suggest you break. And if this hasn't broken you up, then nothing will. You are indeed, as you can see, broken up 1,000,000 times, and put together in many various manners, and yet you retain the inner ego, and in other words, your own identity. But this identity must change. This again is no contradiction. Nothing can be static, and believe it or not, nothing is. An entity can indeed in some ways be compared to a tree that brings forth many seeds, the seeds being individuals in themselves, with all the potentialities to become themselves full entities. Many, as I have said, do. That is, many fragment personalities do become entities. We are dealing here with a psychic tree, however, and the seeds or personalities that do not develop into entities do not because they do not choose to do so. I will go further and shock you thoroughly by mentioning that your regular seeds that do not develop do not fail as a rule because of a lack of the necessary environmental ingredients, but simply because, for various reasons, during a particular arbitrary point, they do not choose to so develop. This applies to the seeds of any flower or tree or person. I have told you that consciousness is in all things, and the power behind all things. The entity itself constantly changes, and an entity can indeed choose to disintegrate. You see the growth process in a very distorted manner because of your antiquated cause and effect theory. Growth on your plane is merely the reflection, or one of the reflections, of value fulfillment, seen through the distorted lens of your perspective. Change, as you must know, involves not only growth, but a complete disorientation, to make way for a different, perhaps newer, orientation. You see value fulfillment in terms of growth, and therefore think of disintegration in terms of psychic destruction and death. That is, you see an ending as the effect of any beginning. This is indeed unfortunate, since there is only a change of form, one form fading into another form. There is no actual point of death, in your terms. You cannot set a certain time to even an individual death, any more than you can set a time for any individual birth. The change is always gradual, even in so far as your own perspective is concerned. The change is gradual because the change is spontaneous. If the change were not spontaneous and not ever occurring and reoccurring, then you could say, now this is the moment of birth or death, even on your own plane. As seen in the physical corpse itself, the physical images does not suddenly cease. In fact, you have an old superstition in some parts of your own country that a man is not truly dead until everyone who ever knew him is dead. And this is true. It is true because everyone who is acquainted with a particular individual creates his own image of him, as he creates his own image of them. As long as memory of a particular individual is alive, that particular personality still exists upon your plane, and this is not always to his advantage. I will have more to say, per usual. I suggest you break, and keep in mind that I will speak more on the construction of the entity, the tree analogy being a good one, because all of our imaginary seeds do not develop into trees. This does not necessarily mean, either, that there is a deficiency, merely that the consciousness involved does not choose, for one reason or another, to materialize fully in a particular form, or to develop any given abilities along certain lines. This may also represent a needed resting point, and you may also now take your resting point. At the same time, you know of what I am speaking. At the same time, you are aware of all that I say. Otherwise, it would make no sense to you at all. A certain level of personal comprehension and a mixture of personal discipline and freedom is necessary. In order for this material to come through, you must have already reached an element of inner freedom and a certain ability to realize your own existence behind the camouflage patterns with which you are usually concerned. You have read of so-called mediums, and I detest the term. Speaking gibberish, the explanation being given that the so-called spirit could not come through. Nevertheless, so-called gibberish in such an instance merely represents, when it is legitimate, the fact that no new comprehensions or knowledge can be so transmitted entirely by the means of an entity speaking from another plane. The individuals receiving such knowledge already are capable of understanding it, and their own inner ego helps them in this comprehension. I have been against the deep trance for this reason, in that I prefer to work with you in such a manner that you are able to use this knowledge consciously, and also feel that you have a part in its delivery. We will now go into one of our basic laws of the universe, and of the spacious present, which would seem to need little explanation, that of creation. On your plane, each atom and molecule contains the potentiality for any physical construction whatsoever. Each atom and molecule contains, as I have said, a generalized consciousness, in which all of the basic laws are known, and also a limited but definite self-awareness. This self-awareness in each atom and molecule determines what sort of cell or combination that the particular atom or molecule will form. The cells then, being a gestalt, contain the individual conscious components, which then form a consciousness greater than the consciousness of any individual component within, and different in scope and ability. In other words, the whole, in almost any case, is more than the sum of its parts. Yet, The inner consciousness of the individual atoms and molecules is not changed, but each of them combine to form this actual. Rod said, "Wait a minute, how do you spell that?" They said, "EXTRAL, value, that is, a value greater than the sum of its individual parts. The cells combine into other patterns, forming finally into your physical organs. When the whole physical body is contracted, the individual personality consciousness is again more than the sum of its component parts. It is more than the combined consciousness of its atoms. Here is your creation. This creation, occurring constantly, is, as I have said, one of the laws of the inner universe. We know now that the consciousness behind each atom and molecule gave physical contraction to the atom and the molecule. That is, the consciousness came first. The consciousness always comes first, representing individualized, eternally potent bits of energy that compose the basic or inner universe. They materialize upon your plane, forming their blocks of construction. The creation that causes the whole to be more than the sum of its parts is merely the inner identities, the bulk of this consciousness, not able to fully materialize upon the physical plane. In other words, no consciousness fully materializes upon the physical plane. I suggest you break, and this last point is an important one to remember, for I am getting more help from you and from your inner egos than you realize. A small note to Robert concerning his ESP book. I hope by now he realizes that extrasensory perception is a poor term at best. Inner sense perception would be a much more acute description. Nevertheless, he is far ahead since he dispensed with material from other researchers and relied upon his own. There is no other researcher, if I may say so, who has the excellent teacher that you have, and your own experiments with psychological time will certainly give you more than enough to say, and later give you evidence that can hardly be denied. A short note also to Philip, thanking him for his consideration and mentioning that changes are already beginning to occur among the leading men within his company. NRG may become important to him in this respect, now or in the future. During our next session, I will give you further material on the inner laws of the universe, and show you again how the so-called laws of the universe, with which your scientists deal, are sadly inadequate and the result of the same kind of distortion as your cause and effect theory. There is a truth behind your cause and effect theory, but it is far from what you imagine, and has nothing to do with continuity. This may be difficult at this point to imagine, but a durability such as that of the spacious present has nothing to do with your idea of continuity in terms of a present, past, and future. As to your experiments with psychological time, Joseph, we will devote an entire session to them shortly. I have been waiting to see the diversity you will achieve, since I will use your experiments and experience as a basis to discuss further inner sense data with which you are not yet well acquainted. I have also mentioned that as your outer senses can perceive the camouflage universe, and as they act within its laws, so also the inner senses are equipped to perceive the inner basic universe, and they directly are familiar with its laws. Through the inner senses, then, you may perceive the inner laws, and remember that the inner ego knows what it is about. The intellect of the outer ego is but a pen image of your own inner ego. We will also go into this later. You are discovering for yourself that basically there is no past, present, and future through your own experiments with psychological time, and you will also experience directly other material sometime before I have given it to you. Incidentally, I do suggest that Ruber make a short visit to Miss Callahan within the next few days. Also, reread your own accounts of your psychological time experiments. Also, I would suggest that Ruber go easy with what he prefers to call the experience of ecstasy, as we do not want him to go too far, too fast. I did not realize that this particular experience would occur so early. It actually represents an amazing ability to focus the complete inner energy. In other words, to command and focus the entire amount of energy inherent within the personality from the inner universe. And as such, it must be used with discretion and discipline. It should never be allowed to be used for the purposes of the emotions belonging to the outer ego. This is rather unpleasant, but such an energy used unwittingly, say, when Ruber was feeling upset with a certain person, could lead to unfavorable circumstances for the person involved. Nor is this shades of witchcraft. Any energy can be used for almost any purpose. There is really little such danger involved here. Nevertheless, until other experiments have been tried, I would strongly suggest that Ruber does not attempt this too often. It will be the means toward some excellent demonstrations in the future. I wanted to mention this. And now, I will end the session. I hope you all enjoy your chicken. I never liked it myself. A chicken is a foul bird. Again, my thanks for Philip's consideration, and my fond good evening to you all. Ralph said, "Good night, Seth." John said, "Good night, Seth."